We're going to do just a quick thing today. So we're going to go over a couple things together. Essentially, what we're going to talk about today is just, since there's so many young people in the room, is let's take the next 84 years of this century. We're going to talk a little bit about where that's going to go, and then how that will affect your personal growth. And then we can talk about some other things as well. So just quickly, think about this question: what's your definition of an entrepreneur? Think about it in your head, what's your definition of entrepreneur, and then I'll kind of answer that. So my definition of entrepreneur is someone that steals office supplies from home and brings them to work, right? Which essentially means anyone can be an entrepreneur. It doesn't mean you have to go start a company. You just have to actually bring ownership to what you do. And the best organizations are ones that are filled with entrepreneurial people. Whether it's the best teachers or the best people in the military or the best people in government or the best people in any organization is filled with these very, very entrepreneurial people that provide ownership. Now, just we all know that the world is going to a more automated world, but just to kind of take it back, essentially, unless you are awesome at what you would do, you will in the next 84 years be outsourced. Just so you know, you don't want to be outsourced. You want to be the outsourcer, not the one that is outsourced. And we'll talk a little bit about what some strategies are around on doing that over the next couple of minutes. If you think about the last 100 years, so if we look back at the last 100 years, the best predictor of success, the best way to go forward was to score really high on, do really well on the SATs. SATs were just a great predictor of success. And essentially what the SATs was testing was systems thinking. How well can you do systems thinking? And that was just a great way to move forward. If you're going to be an engineer or a lawyer or an investment banker or basically anything, having high SAT scores was a great predictor of success. I'm here to tell you that it probably won't be as high a predictor of success in the future, because the thing that's way better than us at systems thinking is computers. And as we compete more and more with computers, as we move more and more with computers, systems thinking is not going to be the thing to move you forward. Today, to get into Harvard, it's almost impossible to get to Harvard today unless you're just a great basketball player. It's almost impossible to get to Harvard today if you have under 1,500 on SATs. That will, and probably even if you have under 1,550. In fact, if you have under 1,600, it's really hard to get into Harvard today. In the future, there's probably still some sort of bar to get into a place like Harvard. But if Harvard's still going to be Harvard in the future, that bar is probably going to be 1,200, 1,100, somewhere in that. And then all these other things are going to be really important, like creativity. Let's kind of talk about some of these things as well. Some of these things that are a little bit different. So just the less valued thing in the futures is general knowledge. Of course, we have the internet. The internet's going to be attached to our brain. And the more valued thing is judgment. Judgment is just incredibly hard to teach. It's incredibly hard to think about. But judgment makes organizations much more fluid. If you have people with judgment, you need less rules. That means people can move much faster. Less valued in the future is knowing more than one spoken language. Of course, we all know that. We'll have these translators. More valued is just sales in any type of language. Less valued in the future is coding. This might be a little bit odd from someone coming from Silicon Valley, someone who codes. But the things are going to be much better at helping us code in the future. More valued, probably something more like art, which is going to be harder probably for computers to do, though they'll still be good at it. Less valued, again, SAT scores. More valued are this kind of combining this left and right thinking. And then less valued is majoring in business. Sorry, any business majors here? More valued, and again, this is probably something all your parents told you not to do, but probably majoring in philosophy, which I think is like one of the better majors out there because it really teaches you how to think and really stresses you on your thinking. Here's kind of there's this debate between the what you knows and the who you knows, and we've all heard this phrase, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I'm here to tell you it's actually what you know, and the what you knows are now beating out the who you knows. It used to be the who you knows were really, really important, and essentially the who you knows took rents from the what you knows. So what the who you knows did was say, oh, there's this what you know over here. Hey, I'm going to introduce you to this what you know over here, and I'm going to take my 20% transaction fee for making that introduction. And so that's the classic broker who's in the middle was the who you know. That could be the real estate broker, could be the investment banker, could be certain types of lawyers, et cetera, certain types of agents that are kind of, they're the who you knows. They're taking somebody from one and introducing to someone the other. Today, the who you knows are like LinkedIn. And so it's decreasing the transaction cost between the what you knows. And so the what you knows can find other what you knows much faster, much easier. It's still really important to connect with people. So networking is still important who you know, but what you knows is now on the ascendancy, and it's now more important than ever to actually know something and be really good at something that you do. And then one of the last things I want to talk about is to really be a superstar in the future. I think it's really important for people to focus on their strengths. Most really good people actually do the opposite. They identify a weakness that they have, and they work on that weakness, and they make it so that that's no longer a weakness. It never becomes a massive strength, but it becomes something that at least is tolerable. It's no longer a weakness. At least they're okay at that particular thing. And almost every smart person takes that strategy. Somebody in school tells them, oh, you're not very good at this thing. They work on it, they work on it, they work on it, and then they become okay at it, right? That, I think for long-term success, especially once you hit like 30 years old, that's a really bad strategy. I think you should understand your weaknesses. So if one of your weaknesses is not understanding your weaknesses, that's bad. But you should understand what your weaknesses are, but you should focus on your strengths. Everybody has some things that they're very strong in. Focus on those and go from good to great. If you become great at anything, you're set for life. All you have to do is be great at one thing to be set for life. If you think of people in the political world like Bill Clinton, they have obvious weaknesses, right? We all know their weaknesses. If you think of Steve Jobs, they have obvious weaknesses. But they have some certain strengths that propel them beyond their weaknesses. Now, okay, if one of your weaknesses is like shooting up heroin in the bathroom, you probably should work on that weakness, okay? So you may have such a debilitating weakness that it impedes all your strengths, but for most people, if your weakness is like you're late to meetings or something like that, I don't like late people, I like to be on time, but if that's your weakness, it's okay, work on your strengths. And, you know, if your significant other are always telling you, like, pick up your socks or something, you know, okay, well, like, they should love you for your strengths. Tell them I said that. So that's the overview. Now we can get into the Q&A, but I just want to kind of, like, put some sort of things as we kind of talk about some of the future, what's going on in the future.
It's on now. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. And as one of the, I guess, younger guys in the audience, I can actually really resonate with some things you listed. I was really actually fascinated about the philosophy, as like highlighting that as like a degree you feel will be more valuable in the future. And for my own education, you know, I went to a typical liberal arts university. Actually, where I learned how to think wasn't at university. It was actually when I went to study philosophy at a seminary at night. Cool. And they read all the classics and read all, you know, from economic theory to also philosophy, and that's where I learned how to think. So I can definitely relate to what you highlighted there. So like, what led you to that conclusion to see that thinking is becoming more important than how our current education system set up is sort of just teaching people to know certain things? Well,
I mean. Philosophy is just I think it's a really good major. In Stanford, they have a major called symbolic systems. Anyone here, symbolic systems major? Which I think is a really kind of a rigorous, good major where it combines philosophy with engineering, some software development, and a few other types of things. Some of the Silicon Valley's most prolific, well-known entrepreneurs are actually philosophy majors, so it's kind of a weird fact, but Peter Thiel, Reid Hoffman, many others are actually, they were philosophy majors, that's what they studied. So people always poo-poo philosophy. I mean, when everyone gives advice, they say don't become a philosophy major, but I generally think it's probably really bad advice to not like at least study it or think about how to think.
And you also highlighted you feel that engineering will become less valuable in the future, like being able to code yourself. Is that correct way of?
Well, I think if you're one of the best software developers, that's always going to be great. I think if you're one of the best at anything, that's great. But for these people who just like are just like learning to code, and they're never going to be great at doing software development, like they're just going to one of these coding academies or something like that. I mean, it could be an okay strategy, but I would focus on something that you're really great at. And you know, if you're not coding by the time you're 13, 14 years old, you may not have had like maybe you're not doing it because you didn't have an opportunity, in which case that's okay. But if you did have plenty of opportunities and didn't do it, maybe that's just something you don't naturally gravitate to, and you should do something you more naturally really gravitate to. So if the best at anything, like obviously computers are going to be really good at like putting accountants and radiologists out of business, but if you're the best accountant or you're the best radiologist, you're going to be the one teaching computers how to do that. So that's going to be really great. So whatever you do, you should try to be the best at it, or at least one of the best, top few hundred or something like that. If you're top few hundred software developer, that's always going to be really great, and certainly like from economically, you're going to be paid a lot more as top few hundred software developer than like top few hundred tennis player or something like that, or even top few hundred soccer player.
And then you had that graph showing what you know and who you know. So I'm interested to hear how you think that actually affects the political system, because the political system is almost entirely driven, in my opinion, by who you know rather than what you know. Well,
I mean, it's part of the reason why most of us are not like super long on the political system. So
can you elaborate? What do you mean, like on our current political system, or like the republic or democracy? Or?
Well, democracy is good, but but on our, most of the people in politics who do well are the who you knows, but some of them are the what you knows, I think those politics is maybe a little bit of a weird thing because it is a little bit of a beauty pageant. But the core people that we will rely on in the future, I think, will be more and more of the what you knows, and they are already ascendant. So even they might not be in elected office, but the what you knows are certainly already becoming ascendant within a White House or within a particular government or advising governments in certain things.
So, knowing that trend is coming, is there anything that you can highlight in the policy-wise or regulatory-wise that you think is like easy target for, let's say, a startup or an entrepreneur to go after seeing this trend?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, one of the things is, well, let's take maybe another trend that's happening, which is, so just kind of in the world of politics, it seems like everyone in politics, when it comes to the economy, is always focused on growth and moving the economy growing faster, which is great. And so I think that's something really good. So that's the offensive side of what you can do in the economy. But very few politicians are ever focused on the defensive side, which is how to make things cost less. And in some ways, for certain people, the offensive side is good for people that want to become billionaires. Then you kind of need the offensive side to do really well. But for just like the average person in America, the defensive side could yield more benefits. If you think in on the offensive side, right now, for like top rate in California, you give 54% of your money to the government. So you only earn 46 cents for every dollar. You only keep 46 cents on the offense, right? So for every dollar you earn, but for every dollar you save, you actually keep the dollar, right? And so if you think of like the four major things that we spend money on, and that's in no particular order: education, healthcare, housing, and transportation. Those four things are probably like the four most regulated things, and they're all probably at least double what they should cost. And so if we could do a few data-oriented things to make them cost just a little bit less, that would make so many people's lives so much better. And this isn't a left-right thing, right? Everyone could agree, both on the left and on the right. Everyone could agree that it would be great if education was cheaper, or if the same value but less, or healthcare was cheaper, or housing was cheaper, or transportation was cheaper, and all of them can be. There's basically like 100% tax that's put in by certain things in the government, and so by making those things cheaper, that could be something really good. And we could probably do that with data.
So is there any so of those big four, have you seen either a startup, or do you have a particular idea yourself of like, if we just did use data this way, we could lower the cost, lower the barrier entry for people?
Well, I don't know. I think these things are all like, have these oligopolies that control them, and so somewhat hard for startups to jump into without changing some of the rules. And so education is just crazy expensive, and partially there's all these weird things that happen. First of all, I'm not even sure why it has to be 4 years for your college degree. Like, why is every degree 4 years? Like, why aren't some of them 3 or 5? Like, just the fact that all of them are 4 means there's probably something weird going on, right? And just why the heck is it so? Why the heck are the dorm rooms so nice? Like, I mean, you go to these dorm rooms and you're like, wow, this is a really nice place for an 18-year-old to hang out in.
I had an arcade in my dorm room.
Oh, you did? Okay, yeah. There you go.
It was, I mean, no offense to you, it was pretty cool.
Oh, okay, well, there you go. But, and so there's all these like weird things that are going on. And then, of course, you know why, because they're all trying to jostle for different types of folks. So some of these things are just harder just because of the oligopolies that are involved. Healthcare has all these weird rules that change everything. They have all these weird incentives. For a lot of healthcare things, the marginal cost is actually 0. So if you want to get or close to 0, if you want to get a cardiogram next time you go to the doctor, which I highly recommend, and especially for young people who are actually really healthy, it's actually really good to get a cardiogram, because you get a baseline for the rest of your life of how your heart's doing before you have heart problems. And essentially the marginal cost for a cardiogram is like a little electricity. So it's essentially 0, but like because of all these weird structures, they have to charge, and it can be hundreds of dollars to do it, and your insurance might not cover it if you're not. So you have all these weird things that are out there, and of course we all know housing, right? Especially in a place like San Francisco, it's a lot more expensive than it should be, and the same thing with transportation.
Well, there was a lunch we had with VC Duncan from Bullpen Capital, and he says that entrepreneurs sort of look to flow around the rocks, which are rocks would be like regulators, and that as an entrepreneur and as an investor, that they look for opportunities that are going around rocks rather than going straight at them, and he also like sees everything you're seeing regarding governments and expanding their role in a lot of areas, and they're not very good at a lot of things that they do. And like my question to him was like, well, is there a moment when there are so many rocks in the river that you can no longer flow, right? So what do you do then as like an entrepreneur? Like do you because you said like you could take the Uber approach, right, which is like just go head on right at them, right? Or you could take more of like a friendlier approach, like some of the startup airlines like Surf Air or Beacon recently closed, or Rise are taking more of a friendlier approach of trying to work with the FAA. Do you have any opinions on that?
Well, I mean, I think what most entrepreneurs do is like they go find another river that has fewer rocks or something like that, which is why so many entrepreneurs are in the digital world, and that's why they're like a lot of them are doing things like just creating photo apps and stuff where there's not a lot of regulation in the way. And so as a government, as a society, we should try to encourage our best and brightest to take on some of these really hard problems. And so we need to try to remove some of these rocks from the rivers as a society to make it more palatable for an entrepreneur to go do that. If you're an entrepreneur, for instance, in France, they jailed some of the executives from Uber, And like you see one of your friends go to jail, you're like, probably not going to take that on, right? Like none of us probably really want to go to jail. It's probably not the best place to be. And we'll go there if we have to, if we have like a moral obligation. Many of us will go to jail to go do that. We admire the people in the civil rights era that went to jail because of what they believed in. But if like we have a choice, we're not going to want to go to jail. And so as a society, we should try to remove some of these rocks, remove some of these stigmas, so that some of the smartest people in the world take on some of these problems.
I agree. Like I would love to see Silicon Valley stop making on-demand, like you can get an on-demand puppy. I think I've heard that, and like cookies, and the on-demand sort of fetish to, like you said, the social media fetish, and start seeing things, like start seeing companies that are creating a new type of infrastructure, a new type of way of, like you said, the big four, a new type of way of interacting. Is there any companies you see like outside? Everyone always points to Uber or Airbnb as like fighting the good fight. Is there any other companies you see as like really disrupting those big four?
Well, no. I mean, there are tons of them that are out there that are doing disrupting, and that are trying to in the healthcare space, in the education space. Transportation space is harder, but there's a lot of them that are out there in the transportation space. Housing is somewhat harder too, but there are a few that are out there in the housing space. But I mean, there's so many education startups and healthcare startups, and a lot of them could be a lot more successful if they were being able to be promoted more, if they didn't run into so many of these roadblocks. Some of them just are nonsensical that are out there. There's certain things that we want to do. We want to keep people safe. But if you know you're going to die in the next 3 months, and you want to take some sort of drug that maybe only has a 1% chance of helping you, I don't know. I think you should be allowed to do it. We're not. The government's role to keep you safe at that point doesn't outweigh the government's opportunity to give you an opportunity to live. There's certain times where you want to change the balance on things, and we should help people do that.
Just before we wrap up, shifting gears a little bit, you're a serial entrepreneur with a successful exit. What's the one piece of advice you would give based on all your experience?
Well, I think probably if people want to start a company, I think it's to be very focused on what you want to do, and don't be one of those people who overvalues optionality. So almost everyone really, really smart way overvalues optionality, and they're always trying to keep their options open. I think you should always try to close your options. You should you should believe in something, not play dice with your strategy. You should just believe in something. Don't poll test your strategy. Believe in it, have a thesis, and then go out and try to prove that thesis. And lots of smart people just always do optionality even in their own career. For instance, the vast majority of people who get a law degree are doing it for optionality, not because they love the law. If you get a law degree, you should get it because you love the law. Vast majority of people who get an MBA are doing it for optionality. The best thing I've ever done in my life is get married, and that is the ultimate getting rid of options, right? But it's so great. And the reason why it's so great actually is because you're getting rid of options.
On that note, thank you so much
for
that. Give me a round of applause. Thank you.